Okay, Council, if I could have your attention, please. I'd like to welcome everybody to this afternoon's Council meeting. I'd like to thank all of our broadcasters and our media who cover our meeting and report on it and broadcast it. Before we get going, I wanted to make a positive announcement. I'm pleased to announce the City of Sault Ste. Marie, in partnership with the local branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association, has received a Bell Let's Talk community grant towards the development and maintenance of the city's first responder peer support program. The program is comprised of representatives from the Sault Ste. Police Services, Fire Service, Emergency Medical Service, and the local branch of the Provincial Central Ambulance Communication Centre. Peer support involves first responders trained in the delivery of mental health intervention, offering collegial support, commonalities, and lived experience, and builds upon pre-existing peer relationships to deliver early intervention. Bell Let's Talk is a multi-year charitable program dedicated to the promotion and support of mental health across the country. Since 2010, Bell is committed to support a wide range of mental health organizations focusing on anti-stigma, care and access, workplace mental health, and research. A formal presentation in detail of the grant will be presented on January 31st, Bell Let's Talk Day, at Centre Ice prior to the start of the Sioux Greyhound game. But I wanted to let the community know that and thank Bell for their support. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 1, adoption of minutes. On a motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti, resolved that the minutes of regular meeting of January 8, 2018 be approved.
All in favour? Carried.
And pecuniary interest?
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rezoning application A218Z 185 Pittsburgh Avenue. The applicant is a client of my law firm.
Thank you. Any other councillors? I have one, Madam Clerk. The clerk had it noted. I'm just looking for it in the council agenda. 7.6.1. That bylaw affects a party that was a client of my law firm. And bylaw, the lane closing bylaw, 11 point, you have it noted already.
11.3.1.
11.3.1, that client is a client of my law firm.
Okay. Under agenda item 4, I have a motion by Councillors Christian and Grandinetti, resolved that the agenda for January 22, 2018 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favour? Carried.
Under agenda item 5.1, Foundation Fighting Blindness Volunteer Awards, Dave Ostrowski-Gallant and Nicole Gallant are in attendance.
If I can have Dave and Nicole just come to the microphone, please. We have a really special award here that I was asked to present on behalf of the Foundation Fighting Blindness. So in 2012, at a meeting of their local Harley owners group, Dave Ostrowski-Gallant and his wife, Nicole, were approached by a friend about taking part in the Northern Ontario Ride for Sight in support of the Foundation Fighting Blindness. In that first year, Dave and Nicole volunteered in the event's organizing committee and helped to plan an amazing inaugural Ride for Sight in Northern Ontario at the Roberta Bondar Pavilion in Sault Ste. Marie. Dave then became the committee chair. For the next 5 years, he and Nicole led the planning of the event. During the 2013 event, Dave and Nicole had a chance encounter with Tanya Busno and Paul Surrett. I believe that's Chief Paul Surrett. Correct. The parents of Carter Surrett, a 4-year-old boy from Garden River First Nation who lives with familial exudative vitreoretinopathy, retinopathy, a very rare disease that left him completely blind. The couples became close friends, and Carter and his family became the driving force and inspiration for the Northern Ontario Ride for Sight. Every year, Dave and Nicole have seen the Ride for Sight thrive, and the positive feedback has been overwhelming. Putting an event of this magnitude with so many moving parts is no small feat. Dave and Nicole gladly took on that responsibility and were successful each and every year. Since they have taken over the planning of this event, it has raised over $100,000 for the Foundation Fighting Blindness and Vision Research in Canada. As the mayor of your community, I'm very proud to present you with this award of appreciation from the Foundation Fighting Blindness for your years of unwavering support and dedication to the Ride for Sight and finding cures for vision loss. It is because of you that we will have a future without blindness. If I can invite you both up. I'll give you the box too. So, Madam Clerk, I think we're on Bonsu Winter Carnival, which explains all the red sweaters in the council chamber tonight.
And Jeannie White, the manager of Bonsu, is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Ms. White.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano and council. Oh, we have the big man coming in the room.
Oh, there
Mr.
we
Bonsu.
go. Hey.
I'm so excited to be here today representing the Bonsu Winter Carnival. Just going to tell you a little bit about what's going on this year. On our opening night, OLG is our presenting sponsor. February 2nd to the 11th is Bonsu. This year we're calling it the Ultimate Block Party. I want the community to feel that they're part of Bonsu and it's in their neighborhood with all the events going around our city. So I say join us for 10 days throughout the city and our host site, the Machine Shop on Huron Street. All buttons are on sale, currently on sale, all Scotia banks, all the Max convenience stores, and Machine Shop box office and Chumney's Grill. I just want to say the bum slides are back, and they're not so white right now because of the warm weather, but they will be lovely by the time Bonsu happens. We also have, new this year, the hay maze. So there's going to be a hay maze in the same area as the bum slides, so we can have people of all ages and disabilities, etc., have an option to do things. Opening ceremonies are 6 p.m. on the 2nd with the OLG fireworks extravaganza, and then following that we have a theater production. I just would also really like to mention we have an exciting new event happening on the Friday evening, and all day Saturday we have the Heavy Meta Dragon. It's this metal dragon, sort of like a Mad Max kind of feel. They have people who will pump up the crowd, play music, and it's huge. It's 19 feet high and 30 feet long. So we're looking forward to the people of Sault Ste. Marie to come out, enjoy the winter, enjoy Bonsu events all throughout our city. Thank you.
So we have I have a proclamation to read.
Thank you.
Whereas each year the residents of Sault Ste. Marie await the arrival of Mr. Bonsu and the Ontario Winter Carnival with great enthusiasm. Whereas many local individuals, groups, service clubs, and businesses organize and sponsor a variety of interesting events for everyone, especially families, through the 11 days of the carnival. And whereas in order for all citizens and visitors to fully enjoy and reflect the spirit of the carnival, they must be properly attired. Whereas this year celebrates the 55th anniversary of this community winter festival.
Yay.
Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, as mayor of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, request that all citizens and visitors remove their ties and button their collars and wear Bonsu souvenir during the period of February 2nd to 11th, 2018, which I now proclaim as Ontario Winter Carnival Bonsu season in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Bonsu is for you, let it snow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano. Thank you, council, and the people of Sault Ste. Marie.
Sorry, did you want to repeat that? I think we lost it to the applause there.
I said, thank you, Mayor Provenzano, council, and the people of Sault Ste. Marie.
Very good.
I look forward to seeing every one of you.
Thank you.
Under Agenda Item 5.3, Crimestoppers Month, Tom Burmaster, President of the Board of Directors, and Anita Patchy, Executive Secretary Treasurer, are in attendance.
That is neither.
No, one is right.
There, Anita, there you go, okay.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano and councillors, for the opportunity to be here today to talk to you about Crimestoppers. My name is Carmen Biasucci, and this is Anita Patchy. I'm the Vice President, and Anita is the Secretary-Treasurer of Crimestoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District. Every year in January, the Crimestoppers program around the world dedicates their time to raise awareness about Crimestoppers and to share our successes with the community we serve. I'm going to highlight our 2017 statistics for you today because I'm very pleased with what we have accomplished in the past year. We saw a significant increase in the number of tips received in 2017, which reached an all-time high of 1,791 tips compared to our impressive 1,151 from 2016. As a result of these tips, we assisted police services with 98 arrests, 246 charges, and the recovery of $77,733 in stolen property, as well as $266,875 in drugs. Unfortunately, the numbers don't tell the whole story. We're in a unique position where we cannot advertise our successes by telling the stories of the crimes we have solved due to the possibility of putting a tipster at risk. The anonymity of our tipsters is of utmost importance. The fact is, every year, numerous crimes in Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District would go unsolved without Crimestoppers. Crimestoppers provides the Sault Ste. Marie Police Services, the Ontario Provincial Police, and other agencies with anonymous tips for the resolution of crimes directly benefiting the people and businesses of Sault Ste. Marie and surrounding areas. I believe an investment in Crimestoppers is truly an investment in our community. The theme for this year's Crimestoppers Month is recognizing transnational organized crime, which speaks directly to many of our current Crimestoppers initiatives targeting the continued increase in the number of human trafficked individuals, the infiltration of contraband, and counterfeiting goods, which present health and economic threats. Often under the direction of organized crime groups, the growing threat of cybercrime on businesses, individuals, and the global demand for endangered and at-risk wildlife. These threats exist in our communities all across Canada, and our goal is to create awareness and mobilize Canadians in reporting suspicious or criminal activities anonymously. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proclamation here. Are you adding anything?
Nope.
No, okay. So whereas each year during the month of January, communities around the world promote, share, and celebrate the success of Crimestoppers programs. City of Sault Ste. Marie supports Crimestoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District by proclaiming January's Crimestoppers Month. Whereas the incredible success of Crimestoppers is due to continued community support. Since inception in 1985, Crimestoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma District has assisted with 888 arrests, the recovery of $1,045,812 in stolen property, and the seizure of $6,489,078 in drugs. When concerned people watch out for each other and report crimes to the appropriate authorities, we all benefit. Now therefore, I, Mayor Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim January 2018 as Crimestoppers Month and congratulate Crimestoppers of Sault Ste. Marie and the District of Algoma for 32 years of success in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Under Agenda Item 5.4, Coalition for Algoma Passenger Trains, Howie Wilcox, Co-Chair, Dorothy McNaughton, Co-Chair, and Linda Savory-Gordon, Member, are in attendance.
Welcome to Council.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Provenzano, councillors, and staff. My name is Howie Wilcox. I am co-chair of the Coalition for Algoma Passenger Trains and the Northern and Eastern Ontario Rail Network. We're here to give you our vision for passenger trains. But before I continue, I would like to recognize Councillor Paul Christian. He's become a very valued asset on our committee. putting Northeastern Ontario back on track. That's our goal. Ensure modern passenger rail service on existing rail beds is part of Ontario's 25-year transportation strategy. You don't have, maybe you have a copy of the map in your documents there. As you can see, existing rail lines are all in orange, and that is where we, no, we got it? Okay, there you go. And we hope to see the restoration of the Ontario Northlander from Toronto to Cochrane and probably over to Hearst. Of course, the Bear train on the Algoma Central line from Nassau to Hearst, and a new service from Sault Ste. Marie to North Bay that would connect with the Northlander train. Northern Ontario is basically 90% of the province, and it needs connectivity over its vast distances just as much as Southern Ontario. And we would insist that any new passenger trains would be something like Bombardier's Vrona Taget, which is a green train that operates in Sweden and is one of the most environmentally friendly pieces of equipment available. And I would like to bring up Dean Anderson, and he's going to talk a little more about the Algoma Central. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Prior to 3 years ago, we had two trains running on the ACR line. We had the tour train and we had the passenger train. The federal government decided that this rail subsidy that enabled the passenger train to continue to run, we were no longer able to receive that because, number one, it wasn't remote enough, and number two, it wasn't profitable. Well, I want to show today that both of those reasonings are red herrings. NEORN, our desire is to upscale Northeastern Ontario's transportation with modern passenger train service on existing rail beds. Something that I am passionate about is seeing how we can make rail travel unique in the north that no one else has. If you want to ask me about something after, there's a company in Ohio that I've been dialoguing with that builds hybrid locomotives that uses Tesla batteries to power their train, which would cut down on 30 to 40% fuel cost on the rail line and make whoever's running the line more profitable. We also want to see the resuming of the passenger trail service connecting the GTHA, the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, to Cochrane, Hearst, and the connecting bus feeders. There are, I counted 34 areas of industry that the stopping of the passenger train has affected. 34. Cottage owners, lodge owners, local hospital, snowmobile, snow train, four-wheeler, dirt bike, Searchmont cross-country downhill skiing, fishing, ice fishing, group of seven, ice climbers, rock climbers, canoeing, kayaking, transportation of food products, which would actually work into Mayor Roswell's former plan of the multimodal, which in speaking with some of these northern communities, transporting of food is a big issue. The transports get there and the food's rotten. The rail service could fix that problem for them. Mining companies, the transportation of their staff, tourists, trappers, hunters, access to remote First Nation settlements, alternative winter transportation. You know, all we got to do is look outside and we have a couple washouts and people that have hospital visits, they can't come. Access to our hospital. We have a pool of anywhere from 10 to 15,000 people that would be closer and more direct if they had rail travel coming and would give us people at our hospital. A mail route, logging industry, M&R, prospectors, rail employees, the interconnection of Northern Ontario communities. We need that. We need each other. This is the North. Anything north of Barrie, people don't get. We don't have that government money that is allotted to be here. That $2.2 million that was allotted for the passenger train, we don't realize that the Metro train in Toronto is subsidized to the tune of $35 million. Are they remote? If that money was taken away, they would go bankrupt. So those are red herring issues. And here's what I want to raise to you councillors, mayor, and all of us concerned citizens, is that is money that the government is taking from us. So the past 3 years, $6.6 million has gone and been invested in the GTA that should have been invested up here. I personally, as the operator of Catalina Motel, the past 2 seasons that the train has not been running, from December to March, I've lost $30,000 compared to the previous 2 years that the train was running. I'm just a little guy, I know that. But my little investment, I can prove to you that it accounts for almost $200 to $250 million, not thousands, $250,000 that's not being invested in our northern economy, which that's 1/10 of the rail subsidy. That's me, a little 17-unit motel. So the Bear train, why the Masqua Udabun or the Bear train, why is it urgent for Sault Ste. Marie? Because of all these things that are listed on the sheet. Here's the interesting thing. Of the 34 things that are listed, areas affected, the tour train only addresses 8. 8. So that leaves us with 26 that the passenger train addresses that it can't do. The tour train only goes up 114 miles. The passenger train goes 296 miles. It brings all-season tourists to our areas. The train to Searchmont, the Searchmont North Pole Polar Bear Express, it's safe, reliable transportation. There's so many reasons that we need this. And this is where it ticks me off. When the federal government is taking money, our money that was allotted to us, and spending it elsewhere. And so this is where I believe that if we don't come together and we don't band together as a community and communities in the north and say, like, we need this money back. We need this. I need this. I can't replace this tourism with anything else. I can't recreate the train. This is money that's lost. The only way I'm going to replace it is by taking rooms from someone else. I try to be an honorable, upstanding guy, and I don't want to do that. I want to create new things and new products. So, but there's so much more I could say, but I hope I haven't missed anything. But there's so many people that are affected by this train. And I urge council that we need... We need this train going again. I need this train going again. It's even, we're dying a death of 1,000 cuts. There's so many small businesses that are affected by this. And I urge you to please respond and try and help us to whoever is going to be operating this train, let's get it going. Let's urge and lobby the federal government for our subsidy back. This is our money. We're remote. We're remote. We need this money. We have to get this train going. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a resolution from council, so we'll just have the clerk read the resolution, then Councillor Christian, I'll go to you. Okay.
It's a motion by Councillors Christian and Myers, whereas the Algoma passenger train has not been operating for more than 2 years and has resulted in substantial hardships for residents, businesses, communities, and other passengers. And whereas 75% of properties in proximity to the rail line are inaccessible except by rail service. And whereas alternate ways of access are not reliable, safe, year-round, or non-existent. And whereas due to further economic downturns in Algoma District, we cannot afford this loss of train-related employment, economic impact, and lack of safe, reliable access to continue, especially for small businesses. And whereas passenger train service is necessary for First Nations to access remote regions of their traditional territories, including spiritually significant locations. And whereas the Missinaba Cree First Nation-led Masqua Utaban Bear Train, Ontario's first First Nation train, would contribute to reconciliation through First Nation employment and economic opportunities. And whereas the passenger train is environmentally responsible transportation, and whereas the Algoma passenger train has been the only safe, affordable, all-season access into the Algoma Wilderness Rail Corridor for over 100 years. Now therefore be it resolved that Sault Ste. Marie City Council support the Coalition of Algoma Passenger Trains to call upon the Minister of Transport to put the Algoma passenger train back in service in order to ensure the mission of Transport Canada to serve the public interest through promotion of a safe and secure, efficient, and environmentally responsible transportation system in Canada is fulfilled.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Wilcox, before we start discussion here, did you have anything further you were planning on adding?
No, I'm just going to ask you about that.
Oh, now that you heard the resolution, you're happy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to be brief. I'm suffering from one of those man colds that half the population's aware of. Anyway, I've been fortunate enough to be associated with this group for about the last 6 to 8 months, and I think you can tell by the speeches that it's a very passionate group, and they all believe in this cause as I do, that we have a real shortfall here in the north, and that's the lack of rail service. It's a small group that works very, very hard, and I've said this before in front of council, that the rail service in the north, or lack of, can't be dismissed. It is part of our economy, it's part of our heritage, it's part of our culture, it's a necessity up north. And it gets very, very frustrating to see that levels of government, senior levels of government, aren't doing what they should be doing. I find it ironic that Southern Ontario, they're investing more into rail service and rail infrastructure, yet they're shutting us down. I find it ironic that several of the members of the committee who have properties on the line north of Sault Ste. Marie just got their impact statements, and the assessment actually went up. So you can no longer access your property, but they've decided to charge you more, or at least assess you more. So I guess remoteness and inaccessibility counts for something. If you've ever traveled the north, if you've ever traveled that area, it's spectacular, it's beautiful, it's rugged, but it's very, very difficult to travel. And the roads to get from here to Hearst are treacherous at the best of times, and that's for the 3 or 4 months in the summer. I used to travel that route in the winter, and you were taking your life into your own hands. It's also ironic that we're trying to promote, reestablish the prominence of the Group of Seven, yet the territory in which we want to celebrate, which is north of the Sioux, we can't get to. So for all those reasons, we've got a very committed group that's working hard to change this, and I think it's important for all of us on council and in the city at large to realize that this is a problem we all share. We've set up a petition downstairs in the lobby at the Civic Center, and I encourage everybody in the audience and anybody out there to stop by and sign the petition in support of our efforts to lobby the federal government to reinstate the Algoma passenger rail service. The petition will be up for the next little while, so please come down and sign. It shows that you support the efforts, and together I think if we speak as one, we'll get more results. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Butland.
Yes. I said the last time the group was here that I'm amazed and thrilled the fact that you people have this stick-to-itness, because it must be difficult and very frustrating. I appreciate the words of my colleague. I guess my question would be to Councillor Christian, perhaps, because I think it's in the political arena. Petitions are good, but unless you have multi-thousands, they don't have great impact. What is it that what does the group feel, through you, Councillor Christian, should the community be doing beyond a petition? I think whatever has been done to this point, we have not been successful. What I suggest that something a little more dramatic has to be done.
Agree. I would actually ask that a representative step to the mic because, like I say, I'm relatively new. I know that there's been ongoing lobbying with the federal government, and we're trying to implement some steps. Beyond that, beyond the petitions, we're really in a position right now where we're gathering information and trying to make cases. So if there's something specific beyond that, maybe perhaps, yeah.
If I can just draw your attention, maybe if we can put the presentation back up. At the end of the presentation, there were a number of asks of the municipality. I had read through those asks. I'm comfortable with all of them. If we get a resolution from council so if we can put up the third last and the second last slide, there you go.
Yeah.
Go one back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go to the next one. Yeah. So these next two slides are the asks.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly comfortable with assisting with those acts. If a council resolution just would direct council to support, mayor and council to support those requests, we can do that. If you wanted to add to that, please just identify yourself for the group here.
I'm Riley Smith. I work for the Missinabee Cree First Nation. So this kind of addresses exactly what I was going to say. A new resolution and letter of support. All of these letters of support and resolution go into our business plan, which has been presented to Transport Canada and to CN Rail for negotiation. All of the other municipalities along the rail line have given us a letter of resolution. So Sault Ste. Marie would be the last, and it would kind of finish our puzzle perfectly. Another thing is we do need more federal pressure. I don't know if I believe that that's through our Member of Parliament, Terry Sheehan, maybe getting a meeting with him and making this more of an issue, because to give you a little bit of perspective on what we're dealing with, we submitted a letter to the Minister of Transportation October 31st through the First Nation, from a First Nations chief, and have yet to receive a response. It's January 22nd, so that's the kind of issues that we're facing on a day-to-day basis at the First Nation, trying to renew the rail service and just have an open conversation. So federal pressure would make a world of a difference. If that comes from the municipality and through our representative here, that's great. Thank you.
So I'm certainly willing to support you with that.
Is it the next slide that we need?
Yeah, I think the resolution, though, can just essentially, it doesn't need to itemize, I don't think, each of the actions here. I think it could just direct that we work with the Neorn group on the requests.
So can Rachel draft something for us?
Madam Clerk,
Do you want me to just add something to the original motion to that effect? Or to the Christian?
We can do that. Yeah. So we're just going to friendly amendment to the original motion. I'm sure that you would all be agreeable to. That would just direct my office to, and any participants on council who are interested in working on this, to work with Neorn on the request that they put before council. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you. I'd be interested in helping out, but I do have one question or clarification through you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fantastic that you got the other municipalities involved, and congratulations to yourself, but to everyone that spoke tonight and to everyone's here and those that are behind the scenes, including Councillor Christian. The work that you're doing is important, so please keep on going. But I guess my question is this: are you reaching out to the other MPs and even provincially MPP, like Manitoulin? I mean, we're all in this together. I'm assuming yes, and I'm assuming that you reached out to Sudbury as well.
Sudbury, you have a bit more. Yeah, we have Carol Hughes is on board with our project. She's been a huge supporter. I think that's it, though.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Just jumping off a little further on that, of course, there's a provincial election coming up in June, and I would really encourage you to get to every MPP that's anywhere remotely, no pun intended, geographically connected to this area. So you've got a window of opportunity to really blow this up into something more. Kind of what Councillor Butland was saying, what else can you do? And obviously, with your friends in the media, you've got to get this hammered out to the public, and you've got to keep it in front of them. So you do have a window coming up very soon, and the federal election is 2 years away?
2019.
Yeah, so let's go after the province now, and
That's in the strategy.
So, Councillor Christian?
Really quickly. Yeah, the issue of the provincial election has come up, and we see that as an opportunity. Quite frankly, it's a good opportunity to get before council too, because there's an election coming up. So that was one of the reasons why we're here as well. So, but nevertheless, I think it's also important, though. It's important for council to be involved, and they get our support, and that's important. And it's good that we have a working group. But this is also an opportunity for the public at large to hear what we're saying. And if anybody wants to volunteer, if anybody wants to get involved, if anybody has the energy to be involved with this, they need to get involved, because that's really what's going to move the things. There are lots of things we can do, but it's like everything else. You've got to have the person power and the energy to do it. So we need all the volunteers we can get, all the people that are interested, because it affects all of us. Thank you.
So I'm just going to have the clerk read what she's added to the motion here, and if that's agreeable to everybody, we'll just confirm that, and then go ahead.
At the very end, and further, that the mayor be authorized to work with the Northeastern Ontario Rail Network in its efforts to reinstate Algoma passenger train service. Does that do it?
So I wasn't looking for her to consign me entirely to that, but that seemed to be the results. So yeah, so we'll do this as a team. Councillor Christian, you're already working on the project. I met with Howie and Linda a few weeks ago and committed to them, and I would continue to support them and assist when I could. So if everybody's comfortable with that amendment, we'll leave it there, and that'll give me the jurisdiction to write some of these letters and contact Terry Sheehan, and we'll work closely with Ms. Sanabi-Cree also.
Sure. Sorry, I just wanted to quickly add in relation to Councillor Hollingsworth's question earlier, I forgot to mention, and I should, that we also have a number of resolutions of support from various First Nations Grand Chiefs too, so they're on board with this project as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Butland, are you going to finish this off here?
Well, you probably hope so.
I suspect you're going to suggest we should do more.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific suggestions about doing more?
I certainly do.
Okay.
Letters are great, but the fact that no one's responded to a letter of October, letters go like that in Ottawa, and you will eventually get an answer, I believe, but it'll go through 18 departments before it gets to the minister. And petitions are good, resolutions are great. May I humbly suggest, through experience, there's nothing like a personal delegation. Talk to MP Sheehan. I'm sure he's able to arrange a personal meeting with the minister responsible, and I know it's not practical to ask everybody who's impacted to get to Ottawa, but certainly we should be able, or you should be able to get a delegation together and go there in person and explain personally, in a very personal way, how the impact is on Sault Ste. Marie and outlying districts. So that's a suggestion. Do as you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Clerk, 5.5.
The ice utilization study, John Stevenson.
Oh, we didn't vote. We didn't vote on that? Oh, I thought we voted on it.
No, you're right.
So before we move on to 5.5, I guess we didn't vote on that last motion. All in favor? Carried. Welcome to council, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do this afternoon, evening is give a brief overview of the ice utilization study that we completed for the municipality. It's a 128-page report, so I'm going to try and be
It's also
brief.
it's also a 32-page slide deck. So maybe if you could.
I'm going to be very brief. Yeah.
Okay.
In theory, I'm going to be brief, right?
Well, we do want to leave some time for questions, 'cause I'm
Right.
sure you will have questions.
So just in terms of the purpose of the research, the two most important aspects were to look at the utilization of the existing municipal arenas and the ice time, as well as to do an analysis of the demand for municipal ice time over the long term. And those two components help to inform findings and conclusions and recommendations about the existing facilities, as well as what additional facilities may be required to accommodate that demand. The research we undertook included a wide range of activities and types of research, and also consultation activities with municipal ice user groups, as well as the providers of ice facilities in the municipality, as well as in the surrounding community. We also had an online survey for residents to speak to the issue of recreational public skating. So I'm going to focus on the recommendations. The first set look at the existing facilities. And perhaps the most important recommendation is that the McMeekin Arena should be replaced in the immediate future, and that the municipality should not make any further financial investment in the facility beyond what's required to continue its operation as in a safe manner until that replacement can be built, and that the municipality should undertake a review of municipal arena facilities in 2026 regarding their continued long-term operation. The rationale for that is there's been a series of issues with the existing McMeekin Arena, as well as based on our assessment of existing documentation of the facility and its age, its original construction, the quality of services that are provided, also supported by feedback and the review and evaluation of both municipal ice user groups and residents. Also supported by the fact you asked us to look at issues associated with long-term sustainability of facilities. Industry standard is in the order of 32 years is the lifespan of these facilities. McMeekin is 51 years old. That lifespan can be adjusted based on the quality of the original construction and the ongoing maintenance and the investment that's made in a facility, and that can extend the lifespan of a building. But really based on our review of that information, we concluded and recommended that it should be replaced as soon as possible. In terms of future demand, we did a very thorough analysis of different components of future demand in terms of your current utilization of municipal facilities, additional current demand, short-term future demand within the next 5 years, and then what would likely happen over the subsequent 15 years. And based on that analysis and the information that was available to us, we concluded that there is sufficient additional demand, and that demand will be sustained over the lifespan, the 20 years that we're talking about, for typical weekly demand for a full season. The quantity of that demand would equal the full utilization of primetime ice on an additional ice pad, municipal ice pad. And that would imply that 5 municipal ice pads would be provided during that time period. So the preferred future municipal ice facility development strategy that we're recommending to the municipality to consider, if indeed you wish to provide that level of service, is to develop the 2 ice pads, the replacement for the McMeekin, and the additional ice pad required to address the demand for municipal ice time as a new twin pad ice facility. and that the twin pads, each pad be based on the NHL size dimension of rink, that seating between 300 to 500 be provided in each facility, and that there be flexibility in terms of the design as well as the site selection to allow for this facility to be expanded in the future. Not necessarily ice-related features, but to really become a community hub or a community focus. There are other general recommendations which are really about trying to take initiatives to address low utilization of non-prime time ice, which is fairly typical throughout the province. But if you do add an additional ice pad, that it is important and strategically important for a municipality to look at what operational options do we have to reduce the impact of that non-prime time ice. Also, there can be a greater role played by the municipality in supporting municipal ice user groups in their activities in terms of the planning and provision of services for residents. And that there'll be an important issue for the municipality to look at the ice allocation policy as you move forward. One of the main features of the ice allocation policy is it allows special events and tournaments as a priority, a number one priority for the allocation of ice. The research that we presented to you shows you that this has a dramatic impact to the regular ice users of municipal facilities, and the magnitude of that use is incredibly large compared to other Ontario municipalities. And so that if you're going to respond to the demands of the future, you're going to have to look at perhaps revisions to the ice allocation policy. And finally, because although I'd like to tell you I have an incredible understanding of the future, I also once recommended not getting a fax machine because I think they take off. It'll be important to monitor and evaluate the assumptions and the trends that the analysis is based on. And that includes the population trends, but also registration in the different ice sports and activities. Because the demand analysis is based on those assumptions, and any changes to that would, in fact, impact demand. This is where I'm being brief. In closing, I do want to comment on a few things. One is Sault Ste. Marie is unique in the municipal ice business. The level of participation in ice-related programs and activities among people 5 to 19 years of age is higher than the provincial average. It's about a 25% participation rate here, whereas it's more like 20% throughout the province. The level of special events tournaments use that's made of municipal ice is incredibly significant, and the fact that you have 2 non-municipal ice providers that are also located in Sault Ste. Marie and are almost fully utilized during prime time tells you their use was not included in our demand. It says that nature of the demand for ice activities in this community is incredibly significant. That's my brief version.
Okay, we're going to take questions. We have Councillor Shoemaker first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the study. Very comprehensive. I think it made a lot of sense. Shows that there's definitely a need for more capacity, and it was based on, on the data, on the evidence. There was on page, I guess I'm venturing into 6.6, which is the actual study itself. Can we ask questions on that, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Page 11 of the study itself. It's 37% of the total municipal non-prime time ice during the typical work week was utilized. A total of 114 hours of non-prime ice time is unused.
Right.
So do we, or you'd say we're at 90% capacity in the prime ice times, 37% in the non-prime ice times. How is that compared to what other communities are at, if you know, generally in non-prime ice times?
Right. So generally, it is the provincial average, or like the provincial average. Some of your facilities, when you look at the individual ice pads, they're more utilized than that average number during the non-prime time. Problem with non-prime time hours, it's when nobody wants to rent it because they're not available to participate. And so what has happened throughout the province, and what we recommended here, is that you look at actually not having the facility open for use during non-prime time hours.
Okay. So on page 16 of this report, you say that you're talking about our municipal ice capacity, and 6.9 is what we should have. By 2036, it'll be 6.5. And then you say that the peewee was included as part of our municipal stock for the purposes of the calculation, which means we have, I think that's 5 ice pads with the peewee. But the Rankin isn't included, so I'm wondering why it was separated out, not included, when it's referred to sort of throughout the rest of the report.
Right. So when the section you're referring to is we're trying to apply a standards approach, which is just another way of doing it. Based on that standards approach, you're looking at 6 ice pads. In my professional opinion, faced with the replacement of McMeekin and the potential of 2 more additional ice pads based on the demand, the specific data we had, we didn't think it was justified. And the reason could be partly because the Sault Peewee Arena provides a quasi-municipal service to youth, whereas the Rankin facility is more like a private arena operation, even though it does serve youth activities and programs. So in that sense, that's why we made that recommendation about the Sault Peewee Arena. And that's another, as I mentioned, something unique for you. If you didn't have either of those facilities and all the demand for ice time was coming to the municipality, those numbers would be larger.
Of course, yeah. Okay. I have a couple questions for Mr. Vera on 6.6. Should it all be?
I see no issue with asking those questions at the same time.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Vera, the recommendation is that we go out and explore financing options to construct a new facility to replace the W.J. McMeekin Center. I've submitted a slight amendment to that resolution for consideration, but I realize the McMeekin's 51 years old. It's repeated a number of times in the ice utilization study. The Puller Arena across the river is something like 80 years old, and it had a huge upgrade 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. So I'm wondering, is there any possibility that we add an ice pad, because that seems obvious we need one, but that we put some money into the McMeekin to bring it up to standard so that we weren't building 2 brand new ones?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that is an option that we can look at to see if it makes sense to do that. I know our consultant has dealt with some of those types of issues as well in other communities and arenas, and I'll also let him speak to that.
Okay. Each facility will be unique, but we did a similar study in Pelham recently, which had a facility similar to McMeekin. And the costs that would be involved in the renovation of that facility and upgrading to be comparable to a new facility were actually greater than new construction.
Okay. I guess that would be kind of the data I'm looking for, because, to my naive, view, it seems like the building's there, the pad's there, the boards are there, maybe it's cheaper, but I guess if we had that information brought to us, that would be helpful. Can that be?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the wording.
We'll get to that, your suggested new motion, Councillor Shoemaker, when we get to actually the motion on the matter.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess along those same lines, in 2001, I think it was, we refurbished and added to the John Rhodes Arena. So perhaps we can compare what the costs of doing that were to what the costs might be of adding a pad in the West End, because throughout all the information it seems obvious another pad's needed, and I'm just looking at what the best way is to achieve that. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll discuss the resolution when it comes up.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stevenson, thank you for the study, a very in-depth review. I am happy that there is a recommendation to replace the McMeekin, although I'm not surprised. I just want to, on Councillor Shoemaker's first point about the prime time and non-prime time ice usage. You say in your report that we need to look at our non-prime time usage. The question remains to be asked, if we were to solve that non-prime time usage in all the arenas, would a second pad still be required?
You're not going to be able to solve the demand side of non-prime time ice demand. There is no way you're going to be able to do that. If you were able to do that, it would revolutionize arena business in Canada, because non-prime is non-prime because there's not many people who want to rent it. So unless there suddenly was an influx of people who had alternative lifestyles who were available and wanted to run programs and activities during non-prime time, then that would happen. So what municipalities have done is they've looked at increasing utilization among school groups, as an example, among learn to skate programs, moms or dads and tots, learn to skate programs. But it's had a minimal impact because there's a lot of non-prime time each day, times 5 days a week.
So is non-prime time something that's evolved over the years? Because I can remember, I played hockey at 11 and 12 in the evening.
Well, so the non-prime time, which is the real issue, is during the weekday, during the day of the weekday. What's happened, based on both of our age, is that the willingness to pay for very late hours, like 11 to 12, at the prime rate, is declined and almost been eliminated throughout Ontario. Same thing with very early mornings classified as prime time and being able to rent them at the premium rent rate. So that has been a change that's happened across the industry.
And those comments would refer, I would imagine, to adult usage of those times. It's not for hockey programs.
No, so the main users of the last hours of prime time, depending on how you define it, are adult, old-timer leagues, or just adults. And as that adult age group ages, they have expressed less willingness to participate. At that time, they've demonstrated that they lose participants and then shrink in size. And they request that they get a better ice time allocated to them. So it's also partly the demographics of the population.
And specifically to that non-prime, your recommendation is that staff look at how to resolve some of that. I think you mentioned in your previous comment that you're looking at closing the facility altogether to eliminate that.
So there may be some facilities that have good prime time utilization, non-prime time utilization is higher, and you have, say, high school hockey utilization of that facility. So rather than being carte blanche and saying, we will not operate during non-prime time hours, you might say, on some facilities with very low utilization and based on the demand, we will not have those non-prime time hours available for use by the public. So that changes staffing and the costs associated with it, that component. Municipalities who have done that have had to look at what the implications are in terms of collective agreements as well as engineering requirements for the plant. But for the ones that have looked at it, they've reduced their operational hours in the day to minimize the non-prime time hours because they're not revenue producing.
Right. One final question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stevenson, if you do that, and other municipalities have done that, did you see or has there been an increase in ice rental rates to make up some of that revenue?
Well, you're not losing revenue, you're actually losing or reducing expenditure.
Like
so the overall financial performance of the arena is improved by reducing the operational expenditure associated with non-revenue producing ice time.
Okay. Maybe one final question, Mr. Ver. Sure. Mr. Ver, right now with our arenas, if we don't rent non-prime time ice usage, does the arena stay open?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, in some cases, because we have sporadic use of the ice with rentals, afternoon or lunch groups that come to use it, some of those facilities are open. I was going to add, in probably an appropriate time, that even since this report has been completed, we have had a bit of a bump or increase in the use of the non-prime time hours. You've probably heard the advertisements with the school boards now offering their hockey academies, and they have come to the city and requested more ice time during non-prime hours, as well as space to do classroom training in the facilities in between ice time. So we're going to take a look at the recommendation provided by Mr. Stevenson in also context of some of the other new demands that are being placed on the facilities through the school boards and even Sioux College with the launch of their 2 new hockey programs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Stevenson looks like he wants to say something else here.
The real issue with the non-prime time ice is that we're able to identify no additional demand for non-prime time ice, okay? So what that means is if you provide a new facility, a new ice pad, we can fully book prime time, but we have absolutely zero demand for non-prime time. So what we're saying is perhaps you don't provide non-prime time in that facility.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so I have a long list left here. I have Butland, Granite, Hollingswood, Christian, and Myers, but we're also at 5:30, which is the planning agenda. So we're going to have to just stand this matter down until we deal with our planning agenda. So are you out tonight on a plane, Mr. Stevenson?
I am.
What time's your flight out at?
I got to be there at 7.
Is that what time the plane is leaving the Sioux, or is that what time you have to be in the airport at?
I think the flight is at 8 o'clock.
Okay,
so.
we're going to get you out of here, but you're going to have to wait a few minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, you can go on the consent agenda.
Planning, agenda item 7.7.1, A218Z 185 Pittsburgh Avenue. A motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti. Resolved that the report of the senior planner dated January 22, 2018 concerning rezoning application A218Z be received and that Council rezone the subject property from low-density residential R3 to low-density with a special exception R3S to permit not more than 15 dwelling units within the existing building upon the subject property, in addition to the uses currently permitted in an R3 zone, subject to the following. 1, that the R4 building setbacks for an apartment building be utilized, and that the required rear yard setback be reduced from 10 meters to 9 meters, and that the property be deemed subject to site plan control, and that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect this approval.
Okay, so we're going to go to you, Mr. Tenazzo. Can you just give a summary of this planning application for those that are viewing from home?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject property is the former Bayview Public School, and the applicant's seeking council's approval to convert the existing building into a 15-unit apartment building. It's an appropriate residential infill opportunity, and the planning director's recommendation is to approve it. Mr. Tony Stirpe is here to address this application should council have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, does Mr. Stirpe want the opportunity to address the application?
I have nothing to add. There's no comments.
Okay, do we have anybody present that is opposed to the application? Anybody present that's opposed? Seeing none, council, do you have any comments or questions for the applicant? Councillor Grandinetti.
Oh, I don't have any questions for the applicant, but
for staff.
For staff.
Go ahead.
On our to the south, I believe it's south. There's a through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Tenazzo. There's a proposed laneway there. Now, has that been offered to Mr. Stirpe, or is the city going to keep ownership of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through the public consultation and the neighborhood open house that Mr. Stirpe hosted, the two neighbors that abut the property to the south and abut that laneway requested that it remain open and remain under city ownership because that's how they access their backyards.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Tenazzo, how many properties does the school board own that are that are vacant currently?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, locally the school boards own about 50 properties. In terms of vacant land properties, there's 7 of them that are vacant, but we have no way of knowing which properties might have vacant buildings in them that aren't being used in any way by the school board.
Okay, that's all I have. I support this application. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments of either staff or the applicant? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Application's carried. Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 7.7.2, A318Z 105 Allard Street, a motion by Councillors Christian and Grandinetti, resolved that the report of the senior planner dated January 22, 2018, concerning rezoning application A318Z be received, and that council rezone the subject property from industrial zone to medium density residential zone R4S, with a special exception to reduce the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 5 meters for the proposed 24-unit apartment building only, and that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the approval.
Mr. Tenazzo, we will be going to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is another residential infill opportunity. This is the former Red Cross office building on Allard Street, on the west side of Allard Street, just east of Rosedale Public School. The applicant is looking to convert the existing or former Red Cross building into a fourplex, and then at some point in the future, develop a 3-story walk-up 24-unit apartment building, again, on the middle to southern portion of the property. The planning director's recommendation is to approve, and Trevor Sachin is here to speak to this application. Thank you.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Sachin. Did you have any comments you wanted to make, or were you just here to answer questions?
No, I'm just here to support it and answer any questions that may come up.
Okay. So is there anybody here? Councilor Bruno, you have a question of Mr. Sachin? Go ahead.
Do we know when the 24-unit will be built? The phase 2 part of it, I guess?
Right now, the owner is thinking probably not this year, not 2018, but into 2019. He's got some design work to do and do some market studies and kind of see everything supported it. He wants to make the utilize the property as much as we can, and to facilitate that, if the market doesn't support it, he's not going to put that investment in to build it. So really wants to kind of see how that's going over the next year or so before making that commitment, but only wanted to put this matter forth to show this is our eventual plan for that property.
Thank you.
We don't have to revisit it over and over again.
Okay. Is there anybody here opposed to the application? Nobody opposed? Any other questions of either the applicant or staff? Seeing none, all in favor? Application passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can go back to the ice utilization study. Mr. Stevenson, I told you we'd get you out of here on time. So we are to Councillor Butland. I might have spoken too soon. Go ahead,
Just
Councillor
one question, but a lot of comments, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Stevenson, you mentioned the word community hub, and I think this is a very common practice now in Southern Ontario, where they have twin pads in the community hub. Can you give us some examples, and what are some of the amenities that are involved with these community hubs?
So the whole idea, I guess, community hubs is the term that's being popular now, but the idea is to create a multi-purpose destination. So the facilities that you see now really reflect the level of interest in other activities that the population is involved in. So you'll see cultural centers, libraries, you'll see health centers, as well as counseling, social service, job creation opportunities, places where the municipality may have an information kiosk or center. The range is pretty wide, and it's based on just the concept of, if we're going to provide facilities, let's try to improve the convenience of the provision of public services and provide a destination so that if people have different interests in their leisure activities, they can participate in them, as opposed to the old style, which was single-purpose facilities.
Thank you.
Councillor Bretland, is that it? Okay. Councillor Grandinetti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This twin ice pad or single ice pad, this was something that we talked about years ago when we were on the getting ready to build this, the West End Community Center, the now Northern Community Center. Aside from the ice, back 7-8 years ago, we spoke about possibly doing a pool as well. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. Is there consideration of doing a pool and an ice pad rather than 2 ice pads?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti. We have not considered another pool at this location. The purpose of this study was really just looking at the ice utilization. At this time, we haven't had any requests or notion to additional pool time.
Another question through you to Mr. Ver. Have we taken into consideration how many user groups go to Sault, Michigan and use the ice time over there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti. Yes, Mr. Stevenson did reach out to a number of the user groups in Sault Ste. Marie and asked them specifically if they were utilizing time in Michigan. As well, he did reach out to the arenas in Sault, Michigan to inquire as to their services provided to Canadian groups.
One more question, Mr. Mayor. There, in this report, there was also talk about possibly adding on to the soccer pitch. Would this be something that would be done at the same time, or do it in the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, it is something that we included. I know it was a notion in the past to expand the soccer facility. The thought was, while construction is underway, if it proceeds at a twin pad, that may be the time while the trades, et cetera, are there to expand the soccer facility. So it's something we'll take a look at and bring back in our report when we come back to City Council.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I just want to say it was definitely a very informative report. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. One of the councillors kind of touched on one question, but not in depth enough, about users. When you did your research, did you look at, I know you looked at Michigan, Sault, Michigan, as we going over there using their facilities. Did we look at any other users outside Sault Ste. Marie, as in down the line, Echo Bay, not just Sault, Michigan?
So we looked at the use of facilities in Echo Bay, as an example, by residents of Sault Ste. Marie, as opposed to their demand, residents of not outside of us, demand for our ice time. So we didn't look at anybody other than municipal ice users.
Okay, thank you. Also, I just wanted to, if I can just clarify, you mentioned briefly demographics, and you mentioned that there's a lot of demand for the next 20 years, I believe you said. Did you look into consideration that the Sioux's median age is 45.7 and 28% of Sault Ste. Marie residents are 65 years of age or older?
Right. So in the report, you'll see we have age-based population projections. And we looked at that and we applied the rate of participation based on the age groups, and then we analyzed how much impact that would have. And we've identified how many fewer participants there would be
Oh.
in like the 5 to 19 age group, and the large increase in the older adult group.
Okay, with the aging population.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And if I can just approach the podium for 1 second.
Yeah, and it says it's canceled, right? So that doesn't mean you get to ask 100 more questions.
I hope not. Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth, is that it for you? Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems pretty obvious what the report is telling us. I have a couple of questions about Mr. Ver's report in relation to this study. So through you to Mr. Ver, I'm just looking at the recommendations. So I just want to be clear. If we approve this, if we give the go-ahead, what we'll be getting back from staff is a full-blown cost estimate on and options with new twin pad construction. Is that correct?
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we would do the cost estimate for the twin pad, also a single pad, look at any other options that may come forward through that analysis work that's undertaken, including, as Councillor Shoemaker has requested, looking at is it an investment to refurbish the McMeekin.
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Vera, follow-up. So are we going, the cost estimates are based on the original design work that was done? So in other words, the design that was once looked at will be the same design we're going to cost, or will we be looking at new potential designs? Save and accept the fact that we could look at a single pad. I mean, we're going to use the old design work that was submitted?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we will use that previous design work that was submitted. We'll take a look at it in light of the recommendations provided by Mr. Stevenson, if there may be some tweaking that we want to do based on those recommendations.
Okay.
But certainly we can take advantage of previous work as a starting point.
Okay. Two more questions. The first one is, it says in the report that we're going to look at a possible, looking at expanding the community center. That would be a separate, that would be separate from the twin pad costing, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Separate.
And finally, is there any time estimate on how long you think it would be before you'd be before council, roughly? Or is it too early to tell? That's
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, probably too early to tell. We don't have an exact number. That being said, we would like to try and, as previously mentioned, take advantage of past work and do some cost estimates in the near term that we'll be able to come back to council with. It will take a bit of time to, analyze, for example, the soccer facility or some of the state of thinking. So, I'm thinking it would be Q3, where we would be Q2, Q3 before we could come back.
okay. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, very informative report, Mr. Stevenson. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Quite clear and easy to follow. On actually, I think it's page 30, the way it comes up on the iPad here, but it's under D, letter D, the long-term future additional demand to the year 2036. And then the slide that goes forward. It says it talks about the utilization, obviously, of prime and non-prime, and obviously it's coming down. It's very clear that the demand and why we need to look at any additional ice time is really pretty much exclusively for the prime time demand, not the non-prime. One question, I don't think I see it in here anywhere, is around, did you have any discussions at all with our Tourism Sault Ste. Marie organization around where they might be able to seek new, if there was more facility, that they might be able to seek to address some of the non-prime time through external events that come?
Yes, we interviewed the representative of Sault Ste. Marie Tourism and Economic Development to identify the business potential of tournaments and special events. The problem, and certainly they identified that there's demand, they want to attract more, they want to increase utilization for those activities. The problem as your consultant is that those activities, if you think of it, like 80% of tournaments and special events occur during prime time, and the 20% occur during non-prime time. So if we want to go out and get more tournaments and special events, then the prime time demand is just going to go up, but it's not really going to help non-prime time.
Okay, and I guess the thing that, the slide that really struck me here is slide number 29. It says long-term future demand for ice time may decrease overall throughout the season, and that's looking at the spread right through to 2036. So I have to ask the question, are we doing all of this for a bubble? Is it going to come back down on the other side, and we're going to be sitting here with, well, we won't be, at least I'm quite sure I won't be, but someone will be sitting here and it's 2036, and for the last 5 years previous or whatever, they've had empty facilities with tremendous underutilization.
I think if you read along on that sentence, it says it will decrease by 2 hours.
Yes.
So we have more demand than we will be able to accommodate in the additional facility. And what we're saying is that that demand will be reduced by 2 hours over the 20-year period, assuming the things happen that we think will happen.
That's based on the additional or the current inventory of ice time?
It's based on the demand that we identified.
Right,
so
but demand has a correlation to what you have to offer.
It speaks to the reduction in the demand for prime time ice.
Okay, regardless of how much you have to offer.
You might choose not to provide a new facility.
Right.
Right? You might choose to provide 4 new ice pads.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
so I want to speak to what happens to demand.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, and I think that's a critical point for us, and that's where I sit as a councillor. And I know some of the councillors around the table have the advantage of they're pretty close to this because they use it. They're users. They play hockey and so on. I don't. So my point is that as a city councillor, I need to really have a clear understanding of whether I'm just trying to meet a demand of the moment that's very pressing, and we get it big time. We hear about it all the time. But that it's going to burst. And, you know, I don't want to spend dollars for the future. I'll have comments, Mr. Mayor, when we get to that, because this kind of dovetails right back to a resolution I brought back at the last meeting on future spend.
So certainly that's the merit of doing that type of research that we did. It's based on some assumptions that the rate of participation remains at current rates. But we looked at trends in participation across Canada and provincially. We looked at population projections, and then we went through each group's registration numbers and said, what would happen if there were this fewer number of people? So I think in terms of the scope of work that we were asked to do, you have a good estimation of what the impact will be. But I think in terms of confidence, what you have to also remember is you're in the middle of a huge market for primetime ice. The Sault Ste arena is not getting it's not getting younger, and they're like booked 78% of the time. Rankin's booked 100% of prime time, and the arenas in the surrounding area, they are selling primetime ice to residents of Sault Ste. Marie. So, and we're not saying meet all that demand, right? So that's, you know, when I think of it, the future, I think, what happens if you didn't have Sault Ste. Arena? Where would those 78 hours of primetime demand come to? They would come to the municipality. We don't have any time to sell them. We're not going to have any time to sell them in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. But from your perspective, should we be worried that suddenly the bubble's going to burst and we're going to play what, indoor soccer? No. I think the demand for ice-related activities in Sault Ste. Marie is strong, and will remain strong in the future.
Thank you. Again, as you said, with some assumptions, and none of us have a crystal ball, so that's all you can go with is your research and data comparatives. And my last question is around public-private sector. Did you look into, and are there any models out there for public-private sector that it doesn't necessarily have to be that we, the municipality, build? We could look at some public-private sector opportunities. And when you mentioned the Pee-wee, that is a good example.
So the Pee-wee is a different example because it's a nonprofit charitable organization as opposed to a private organization.
So I should include them in the scenario. Then what I'm talking about is non-municipal dollars.
So there are all kinds of alternative service delivery models used in ICE facilities for sure. The private-public partnership has met with limited success. It was the rage, but it hasn't panned out to be incredibly successful. There are a few municipalities in urban areas and in Western Canada that they have ongoing private sector. They built, financed the facility, and they operate it, and there's a lease back. They charge. It's basically a finance deal, right? You don't see that as much in Ontario because many municipalities have existing infrastructure. So you'd have to be matching a private operation with a public operation. And basically, private operations make money by limited staffing and high rental rates. And their rental rates are every hour is prime time. So there are examples. I don't really think a private sector operation of this facility will be successful. You can spend money trying to solicit their bids, but I don't think it'll work. Private sector financing of the construction of it is an option you can look at, but to demystify the whole idea, they're just another way of borrowing money.
For sure. And then to close off the loop, are there any models out there with nonprofit and public?
So throughout Ontario and also throughout the rest of Canada, there's lots of models of volunteer organizations or arena boards of management, because that's actually where the indoor ice thing started in Ontario. It was a group of volunteers who formed together and did it. So there are lots of examples of those that continue. But again, they primarily now are concerned with the operation of the facility as opposed to the finance of the capital costs.
Okay, thank you. It's been most helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was going to speak about the private sector and municipality, but Councillor Myers read my notes, I guess. So I guess my questions to Mr. Ver regarding the John Rhodes 1, John Rhodes 2, and in the report it says the McMeekin Center is 51 years old. What's the age of the John Rhodes 1 and 2?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, excuse me, the John Rhodes 1 is 41 years old and John Rhodes 2 is 19 years old.
Thank you. And of course, the 32 years is a generally accepted industrial benchmark for the arena life cycle. So we have passed, there's two arenas that we've passed the life cycle, which is the John Rhodes 1 and the McMeekin Center. The SR is, I forget what it is, but it's about 8-9 years old. 2006, thank you. So we are in need of one more arena, but I will agree with some of the councillors that I would love to see a cost estimate to come forward for single, for twin, and also I would like to see a cost estimate regarding the indoor soccer field, all one package. I know this is strictly for the ice arena, but why are we going to do double the work? Why not come to us with the package deal for the West End?
I think that's the intention. The intention is to get all of the numbers together and show you what the whole package would look like.
Yeah. Okay. That's my question, comment.
Okay, Councillor, you really don't want to get to the vote on this, eh? So Councillor Fada?
Quick question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, are you aware of any opportunities in terms of, like, for example, federal infrastructure funding that might become more available in the next little while? Are you aware of any possible funding source from the upper levels of government that we can perhaps look forward to in the short term?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fada. We were just on a presentation last week regarding some of the Build On programs. The Ontario government has a new finance program negotiating infrastructure with the federal government. And there was $470 million, allocated towards recreation infrastructure in Ontario. We haven't got the details of that program, so that's something we will look into as we come back with different options to find out when that program would kick in and if there's an opportunity to leverage that investment.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Grandetti, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, just touching on a couple comments that Councillor Christian had made. I was on this committee, and everything was planned out to do 1 or 2 ice pads. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver, have you been in contact with the original architect for rough price estimates? Because he's got all these numbers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, yes, we did reach out to the original architect, and he is updating the numbers that they had created for us back in that day to bring them forward to 2018.
Okay, because if I remember right, for a single ice pad, we were going to do 1,000-seat arena for a single ice pad, and I don't remember what it was for the double ice pad. Now, another question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. Has there been any thought of building one ice pad and selling the McMeekin Centre, privatizing that and having the double ice pad on the same site?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, we did receive some calls, it was probably over a year ago, with the private sector interest that was, or private sector company that was interested in that potential. So that is an option that could be considered for the facility going forward.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Council, we're going to pull up the report, 6.6. Yeah, well, you can, if you really need to have comments on this, we can make comments, but we're going to pull up the report and read a motion so we actually have the matter in front of us, and then we can deal with it. So we have the report, which is at 6.6. So I'm going to have the clerk read the motion that goes with that.
As well as the amendment.
Just read the motion that goes with it for now.
Motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated January 22, 2018 concerning a third-party ice time utilization study be received. Further, that Council requests staff complete a report that outlines facility options, the cost associated with these options, and financing options, including sources of external funding to construct a new facility to replace the W.J. McMeekin Centre.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder on that. I want to be clear that what we're doing in that respect is asking staff to report back on options. You're not deciding to build the rink tonight. Notwithstanding that, we have a suggestion from Councillor Shoemaker, which really is an amendment of this motion. So I'm going to read, it's the same motion in its entirety except the last part, where the current motion reads to construct a new facility to replace the W.J. McMeekin Centre. Councillor Shoemaker wants to change that wording to read, to add ice capacity to the city's current stock of ice rinks. So I don't think either way you're going to negatively affect the work staff's doing. So if everybody's comfortable with Councillor Shoemaker's suggested, so it's the same motion. Do you want me to read the whole thing? The end result would be to include sources of external funding, and bracket, to add ice capacity to the city's current stock of ice rinks. So I think what Councillor Shoemaker is doing is, don't just restrict it to building a facility. He's giving staff the leeway to offer other options to increase our ice capacity. Obviously, staff is going to come back with the options that relate to building, but if there are other options they can canvass, they'll canvass those at the same time. So if that's a friendly amendment, so the mover and seconder of the first motion are? Butland and Grandinetti. So, Councillor Butland, is that a friendly amendment? Councillor Grandinetti? Okay. So we have that motion in front of us. We'll take comments. We've been through this for a while now. We have a number of other delegations here and other matters, so I ask that we be as brief as possible because, again, we're just requesting a report back with Councillor Butland.
Yes. First of all, the report is comprehensive. We appreciate it very much. And it's good to hear that we're in a unique situation. The 5 to 19-year-olds participation rates are higher than many places in Ontario. So it's a good study, much appreciated. We cannot retrofit that McMeekin Centre, nor can we sell that McMeekin Centre. That would be, we simply cannot do it. I spent an hour and a half at the McMeekin Centre, and it is an unmitigated disaster.
Can't sell it now.
No, I assure you, you can't sell it. It's like an outdoor rink, except it has a roof. The only difference is the roof leaks. Someone suggested it's the best ice. It was the best ice in the city. It's so bloody cold, it's like the outdoor rink. But at the same time, there's faults now on the ice pad, and the pavement underneath is starting to warm, so we're having warm ice and it's starting to melt. So that's one of the things. We have spare parts from the SR Centre. I think it's a time clock. We have spare parts from the John Rhodes facility. The refrigeration units are shot. The boards are no longer acceptable. The dressing rooms are no longer acceptable. The dehumidifier does not work. The heating system does not work. There is mold in that building. So thank God Rob and Jason have been able to keep the place together in operation. But the longer we keep it in operation, it's going to cost us a lot of money. Any day, any week, any month, it's going to bring tens of thousands, if not more, financial risk for the community. So please, let's put that one to rest. I know that's not in the resolution. I don't really care. That's where I'm coming from. You see this facility. As I say, the roof is, you've got it? Okay, thank you. It is a disaster. We should be building a new facility, probably a twin pad, and probably a soccer, regulation size soccer facility, because the demand is there. Community hub in Southern Ontario, community hubs are being built. The amenities should be decided by us. The SR Centre, about 8 of us, I think, got on a bus and toured many facilities in Southern Ontario. We came to Sarnia's and we said, we like that model. Let's build one that resembles Sarnia. Ours is newer, so I think we made improvements in our facility. But I think it has been successful. I think people will come here and say, that is a good facility. Sault Ste. Marie has every reason to be proud. So some of these amenities, be whatever. The demand for ice time, Sault College is going to have the first time an ice hockey team. The 2 high schools are having ice skill academy. The ringette is expanding. We are unable now to attract tournaments. We would like to have tournaments, but we cannot. If we have tournaments, their ice time is going to be displaced, the prime time ice time. So they just upset your regular users. So people want to come to Sault Ste. Marie because they like it when they come here. We do a great job. But at present, we cannot accommodate tournaments as much as we should. So for heaven's sakes, the cost of keeping this facility is not a starter. Let's look to the future. If you build one of these every 30, in this case, every 50 years, we need to demolish that McMeekin, and let's go forward with a vision. It's something very positive in the west end of the city, and let's have a community hub Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Oh, by the way, the Rankin just spent $2 million on the facility, so it should be good for the future.
Mr. Stevenson, just to be clear, if you'd like, you can take your leave of us. You're welcome to stay and watch, but you certainly can sit down. You don't need to.
If you're finished with me.
We are finished. We are debating a motion that is surely going to pass. So on that point, we're not arguing for or against actually building the rink tonight. We're actually just talking about getting a report from staff. So, Councillor Shoemaker, with that caveat, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I didn't have you.
I will only respond to some of the comments that I've heard from my friend.
Or you can wait,
with respect.
Or you can wait to when we're actually arguing about building this or not and respond to it.
Absolutely, but with respect only to the recommended changes that I made to that motion that in fact Councillor Butlin's name is on, even though it seems he doesn't agree with them. Councillor Butlin, right at the end of his comments, I think undermined his whole argument. He said, the Rankin just put $2 million into their arena, and so it's good for the future. Well, what would $2 million, what would $3 million do to the McMeekin? That's what we need to look at. We need to look at, it's going to cost, I've heard estimates, somewhere in the range of 10 to 15 million to build a single pad. Might be 25 to 30 million to build 2 pads. Well, what would 1 million, what would 2 million, what would 3 million look like in our existing arena? The ice utilization study identified a immediate need for ice. We're not going to build a new arena for 2-3 years if we approve it this year. So I can't see how we can just dismiss options outright without looking at them, and that's where my friend and I disagree, respectfully, Your Honor, Mr. Mayor.
This motion is going to pass unanimously, but we're going to argue about it for a little while longer. Councillor Myers?
My comments very brief, Mr. Mayor. I want to hearken back to the resolution from the last meeting where I talked about looking into the future. I had no idea we were going to look into 2036, but I did want us to look into the future, and I made the point, and we're seeing it. I think it's going to come back to us in report. We need to spend some money in order to better service and to prevent in the longer term some other costs. And for example, the changes alone in the environmental aspects of building a new facility, even from 12 years ago when we opened the Memorial Gardens, it's changed dramatically. So that's exactly, I'm very excited because I think that this council is going to do that. I think we're going to build something. I hope we can get a report back before the end of this calendar year. And I hope that we can approve some spending to go forward into the future for our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Motion's carried unanimously. There we go. Okay, so I'm advised, Council, we're at the consent agenda, but we're actually going to, before we get into consent, we're going to pull a matter off consent, and then we're going to deal with the matter in 7, because we have delegations here. I'm advised we have a delegation here on 6.7, which is the street assumption, closing, conveyance, Pierce Street. So we're going to pull that off consent, and we'll deal with that separately. So do any councillors have any questions of staff on that report? Seeing none?
Wait. We're going to pull it so that we're going to address it.
We're dealing with 6.7 right now.
Oh, we're dealing with it right now.
We're dealing with it right now. So 6.7. So it's before you. So if any councillors have any questions of staff on that, Madam Clerk, could you read the motion for 6.7?
There is a report, and then there's not, in fact, a motion except the motion to pass the bylaws 2018-17 and 2018-18.
Okay, so there's no questions on that? Okay, so we will move on from that, and that'll just go with the remainder of the consent agenda. Yeah. We're going to pull up
6.1?
Yeah. So why don't we pull that bylaw then,
I can
Madam
pull
Clerk?
the 2 bylaws, sure.
Okay. So it's 11.1.8 and 11.1.9.
Let's have a motion by Councillors Christian and Grandinetti. Resolve that bylaw 2018-17 being a bylaw to assume for public use and establish as a public street, Pierce Street, and I'm not going to cite the legal description, and 0.30 meter reserve on the easterly limit of Pierce Street, Pier subdivision be passed in open council this 22nd day of January 2018.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councilors Christian and Grandinette resolved that bylaw 2018-18, being a bylaw to stop up, close, and authorize the conveyance of Pier Street and a .30 meter reserve on the easterly limit of Pier Street in the Pier subdivision plan 1M448, be passed in open council this 22nd day of January 2018.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, we will move on to
7.6.1.
no,
The animal control, right? 7.6.1.
So we're going to move on to 7.6.1. Councillor Christian, I'm going to ask you to... Yeah, he's going to have to...
7.6.1 is a report of the solicitor with respect to an animal care and control bylaw. And again, there is a bylaw 2018-19 listed under item 11 of the agenda.
Your speakers.
Good morning, council, or good afternoon, council, I apologize. I'm Jonathan Poitras. I am counsel for Spruce Haven Nature Park. There has been a bit of confusion about getting a hold of my law firm. I have since changed law firms, and I was to have...
Could you move a little closer to the mic, please? You could bend the mic. Yeah.
And I was to have a meeting with Ms. Nuala Kenny and previously Mr. Mayor Provenzano. I would ask that this be simply adjourned for the shortest period of time, which I understand is 2 weeks, so I can have that meeting with them. That way we can discuss the possibility of grandfathering Spruce Haven Nature Park in and/or any other matters that may be involved.
Okay, so the request is to ask for a delay or
To be postponed till February 5.
postponement for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So what do we need?
I'd need a mover to that.
So we would need, I guess, a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hoopanen and Councillor Hollingsworth to, yes, Councillor Myers.
Question through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Perhaps it's to the clerk, I don't know, or to the solicitor. Do we have to put a time frame? Because what if something comes up and the appropriate, can't we just say that we're just to allow time for the opponent to meet and don't put a time frame on it? We don't know what the agenda is.
You could do either. You could do to a certain time, or...
I would leave it open, and if it comes back in 2 weeks, fine. But if we don't even know what the agenda is in 2 weeks' time, we may have it may not be that it's the best night. I don't know.
Okay. Did you want to say anything to that,
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Myers. I think it should come back in a relatively short period of time, but to leave it a little bit open is good because we have to coordinate some meetings. And just as Mr. Poitras said, we had attempted to meet prior to this coming to council, but there were a number of factors that got in the way of that through nobody's fault, really. But I'm eager to meet with Mr. Poitras, yes.
So it'll be done when it can be, but why do we have to put a date on it?
Okay.
My point.
Councillor Hoopanen.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. No, I believe, and I would like to request that it comes back February 5. We have been sitting on this since January last year. I think 2 weeks is ample time for the lawyer and the Spruce Haven folks to meet and discuss it. I would like to see it to come back on February 5.
So I'm not sure.
Do you need a resolution?
Yeah.
Well, that is the... Councillor Hoopanen is the mover and requesting that it be postponed to February 5, 2018.
She's asking for February 5th.
That's 2 weeks.
Yeah. And if my client could say something.
Sure, go ahead.
I think an important thing to know is that this bylaw that I've seen, my first look at that was a few days ago. That is it's a very complex thing, and it's raised a lot of issues, okay, to do with animal welfare. And a lot of those things we are pursuing, okay. We have contacts in the industry with veterinary sources, and we need some time to pursue this. But looking at that, I think I first saw it, I believe it was this past Friday. That's the first time that I've seen that. Now we have answers, and I provided council with some information, okay, and about what we're doing, what our plans are, and so on.
I know.
But there's some issues that thing raises that I think we would all be wise to have investigated before that bylaw is passed. Some of them could have ramifications for the city, and I think we have the resources, and Mr. Poitras has the resources that he'll pursue these. And yeah, we don't need 2 months.
Okay. And
we don't need 3 months.
I appreciate your comments, but the request was to defer this, so, let's not get too deep into it. Councillor Grandinetti, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. There's a letter here from CASA that's asking for them to come in and conduct an independent inspection. I don't know who can answer this question. Is this something that we're going to authorize, or Mr. Marshall's going to authorize for them to come in and do an independent investigation on this facility? Inspection, sorry.
Okay.
Through Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, excuse me. We don't have the authority to authorize them to enter onto private property. They can conduct whatever inspections or work in conjunction with Spruce Haven that Spruce Haven and their council allow, but we don't have a role in that.
Okay. Through you to the presenter, is this something that you're willing to do?
You're
Guys,
talking about
listen, the request is to ask for delay here, deferral, so we're getting into the weeds here. We're for the purpose of the process and allowing this group to meet and go through the process properly. That's the request. We're starting to get into the
merits.
It's the reason I'm asking this, that if they're going to allow for this inspection, is if we could have it all at the same meeting.
Well, I think the purpose at this point is just for our solicitor to meet with this group.
Okay.
That's the question right now. That's the question right now.
For and one argue against the deferral, and we're into the agenda item. So we've got, I believe Councillor Huppenen's ready to argue in favor of a deferral. I'm ready to argue against the deferral, and then we call the question. Is that not our procedure?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So, Councillor Huppenen.
I'm requesting the referral.
Right.
Why?
You argue for it. Is there anything else you'd like to add to it besides the date? Is there anything else you'd like to add in?
No, I think that if the marshals have actually requested the deferral, so I'm willing to oblige to that. And I think that if they want another 2 weeks, then that's fine. I'm happy to accommodate that.
Okay.
Would that give you enough time, Mr. Marshall?
Well, the questions are addressed to the chair, not to the...
I can advise that I have talked to Ms. Newlakenny, and I plan on meeting with her before the 2 weeks is up to discuss an exit plan for Spruce Haven Nature Park. They're no longer producing animals nor taking animals on.
Okay.
No.
And this is why it's important that this meeting happens.
Okay.
Because at this point, let's not argue the merits.
That's right. You made your point,
Councillor Myers.
I'm arguing against the deferral with a timeline on it, simply because I feel that if we don't do that and just leave it open, there may be issues that come up that do require more time. We're going to be back here asking for another deferral in 2 weeks. So it's a minor housekeeping item in my perspective, is that we all know we're going to get to wherever we're going to go here, but if we put a timeline of 2 weeks and they require 2 weeks and 4 days, then we're going to be back here with it on our agenda simply to adjust it. So it's a minor thing. I'm just suggesting that we don't put the timeline on it. And so I'm not arguing against deferring it, period. I'm arguing against deferring it with a specific time to come back.
Christian.
Yes.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. The lawyer just said right out to council that he can have it back in 2 weeks. So I'm totally for that. So
why don't we leave it open with the understanding that it'll be back in 2 weeks?
Yeah. That's fine.
Go ahead, call the question.
Call the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor of the delay, the deferment? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council.
Okay.
Just messy. Do you want to stay in the chair till the mayor gets back?
Until he gets back. Okay, what's next? All right.
On the consent agenda, a motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti, resolved that all items listed under date January 22, 2018, agenda item 6, consent agenda, be approved as recommended, save and accept agenda item 6.6.
Council, I'm just gonna, do we have a lot on the consent to cover? Because Councillor Shoemaker has to leave, and he asked that we cover his motions before he leaves. So if we do have a number of consent items that we're gonna go through, I'm just gonna ask to switch gears here and go down the motions. Councillor Grandinetti?
I have one quick question to Commissioner Girardi on item 6.4 on the tender for the backhoes. Now, these prices vary. It's quite a big range in the price difference from the guy you're offering a tender to. On top of the monthly or weekly rate, is there an hourly charge to this? Because most of these guys you rent per month or per week, and then they tack on an hourly rate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, if you look at the on the actual chart, it'll show you hourly rate over the 720 hours per unit.
Okay.
That would be the charge that we'd get charged extra if we go over and above.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
That's good.
Council, anything else on consent? I think we've covered the main things. All in favor? Carried. So being through consent, we're going to go to 8.1. Madam Clerk, if you could read that motion, please.
Agenda item 8.1, warming shelter plan. I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Nero. Whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie's current emergency management plan only provides for warming shelters in the event of widespread power outages. And whereas warming shelters protect the most vulnerable in the city, especially the homeless, in times of extreme cold across the city. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie has recently experienced a significant period of extreme cold, now therefore be it resolved that appropriate staff, in conjunction with any other service provider who wishes to participate, be directed to bring forward to Council a cold weather response plan that aims to protect the most vulnerable people in the city from the extreme cold weather.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was, I think, minus 38 the other day when I drafted this motion. And we've been getting, as everyone here knows, really cold weather. And so I called our emergency management coordinator and asked if we had a plan for emergency shelter, emergency heating shelter in cold weather periods. And we only do if there's widespread power outages across the city. So not just when it's cold out, but there are, the most vulnerable people in our community in need of a place to go when the temperatures drop. So I think this is a major need in our community. Sudbury, North Bay, they all have warming shelters. Toronto obviously has a lot of warming shelters. They've been at or above capacity recently. So I think it's important that we identify if there's the possibility that we can provide a safe, warm spot for people to be when the mercury drops, which it inevitably will.
Okay, anybody other comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
Under Agenda Item 8.2, Letter to MPP and Minister of Labour regarding construction employer designation. Motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Grandinetti, whereas the Ontario Labour Relations Board decision to designate the City of Sault Ste. Marie as a construction employer in 1987 has meant that a monopoly on city construction work is held by two specific unions, to the exclusion of all other unionized and non-unionized businesses. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie has directed its staff to prepare and implement the necessary changes to the city's practices in order for it to challenge its construction employer designation. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie recognizes that a legislative fix to the Ontario Labour Relations Act would be the quickest and most inexpensive way for the city to shed its designation as a construction employer. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie supports and encourages a change to the Ontario Labour Relations Act, such as the one previously proposed by MPP Michael Harris of Kitchener-Conestoga. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Sault Ste. Marie, through the Mayor's office, set out in a letter to MPP Ross Romano and Minister of Labour Kevin Flynn the City's position and desire to see a change to the Ontario Labour Relations Act that would exclude the City of Sault Ste. Marie from the definition of a construction employer.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is complementary, I guess you could call it, to the motion that was up at Council just before Christmas that passed 12-1, that directed staff to make the necessary changes to our operations to be able to challenge our construction employer designation under the Ontario Labour Relations Act. As we heard at that time, it could be a 3, 4, 5-year process to successfully challenge that act, and that the quicker and better legislative fix would be to change the definition of construction employer in the Ontario Labour Relations Act to exclude municipalities from that definition. So there had been previously proposals before the Ontario legislature to do so. They have not been successful up to this point. But as a city that is wanting to see this change, I think it's important that we put it forward to our MPP and to the Minister of Labour, who's in charge of the Ontario Labour Relations Act, to tell them that's our wish that that this provision be changed.
Any other comments? All in favor? Carried.
Does Councillor Shoemaker have another? Oh. Under Agenda Item 8.3, traffic lights at Gore and Albert and Andrews Streets, a motion by Councillors Turcot and Grandinetti, whereas in or about the fall of 2016, following construction in the Gore Street area, traffic lights were removed from the intersections of Gore and Albert Streets and Albert and Andrews Streets. And whereas after the traffic lights were removed from these intersections, there appeared to be more accidents occurring in the immediate months following. And whereas city staff suggested that drivers need time to get used to the new intersections, and whereas ample time has passed and this does not appear to be the case, and whereas the following actions were taken by Public Works as per the direction of City Council on August 21, 2017. Extra large stop signs were installed replacing existing signs. New starburst signs indicating the stop sign were installed. Thermoplastic wording was installed on the roadway stating "Stop ahead." And whereas PWT indicate that staff would continue to monitor the intersections and provide updates to council, and whereas to date the situation has not improved and current statistics indicate that there are unprecedented numbers of accidents involving these intersections, with the Gore and Albert Street intersection ranking first as having the most accidents for the year 2017, and Gore and Andrews Streets ranking second. And whereas on one day alone in January 2018 there were 3 accidents with personal injuries at the Albert and Gore Street intersection, and whereas the neighbors continue to be upset, and whereas the sightlines at Albert and Gore Streets continue to be a concern to drivers who park on the west side of Gore Street, making it difficult to see oncoming traffic on Gore Street at the Albert Street intersection, and whereas the city has recently purchased properties on Gore Street that could provide off-street parking to businesses on Gore Street to alleviate the sightline problem by removing some of the parking spots, now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to further investigate these scenarios and bring a recommendation back to Council by the March 5, 2018 Council meeting to rectify this problem, including the reinstallation of the traffic lights at these 2 intersections.
Okay, Councillor Turcot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm out of breath. That was I wrote that. Somebody would say that's self-explanatory, but it isn't. there's more. So if you allow me, Mr. Mayor, I want to add just a couple of notes, and then I'll yield to the seconder if he has any more to add, Mr. Grandinetti. I'm not a traffic expert or a traffic engineer, but what I've seen here over the last year and a half is unbelievable, actually. It's changed the entire area traffic pattern. That's what we've done a year and a half ago, with all due respect to our traffic people, all at once, not piecemeal. For example, lights out, Cathcart Huron, lights out, Albert Street at Huron, change at Albert Street West and John Street, lights out, Albert Street and Andrew, lights out, Albert Street and Gore Street. I'm not sure why we did this in the first place. Was it for financial reasons or traffic calming, as we say? What drivers had to do here, all of us in this room, I'm sure, have had the experience on Gore and Albert. As we go home or go to a hockey game, come back after a game, what drivers had to do is change their driving habits overnight. All of them, not just one area. I'm not going to spend too much time. As I said, it's mostly, and we brought this point out before, but I do, in the last little while, talk about the old days. We used to just get letters or maybe a phone call or two, but I received emails in the last couple of weeks, letters, phone calls, that's right, text messages, information on my Twitter account. I don't have Facebook yet, or Instagram. People on the street even stop and talk to me about it. I was at A&W Drive-In the other day, Mr. Councillor Budlin, and the lady that came out and gave me my lunch, she said, "Are you going to push for the lights at Gore Street?" So everybody is aware of it, not just the people in the area, but the entire community and visitors that come to our area. As an aside to that point, we have 5 lights on Wellington Street between Gore Street and the underpass. 5 lights. I brought that up, why we need 5 lights there over the years. And the other thing, too, is I'm wondering, why did we jump, maybe Mr. Girardi can answer this question later if he can, he has time. Why did we just put flashing lights at the corner of Albert and Tancred Street just recently, but not Gore Street? What we have here is a safety concern, not only for the citizens of Ward 4, soon to be Ward 2, but all citizens and visitors to our area. They have to deal with cars, trucks, right at the doorsteps, businesses in the area recently, including a city bus, Mr. Mayor, and a truck recently. That route is also used by our fire services as well as our visitors to Sault Ste. Marie who are not aware. Just a couple of comments. I'm not going to read all the emails. Here's one from Allison. By the way, a lot of these folks live in the apartments in the area, so they see what's happening there on a regular basis. Lou, what can be done to have the stop lights installed at the corner? There was 2 accidents again today. That was January the 9th. And somebody else said, I've been driving for 50 years, and I've never seen anything like this. More accidents in this city than ever before, especially downtown. And another one from Louise. I read about Gore and Albert to restore traffic lights. That's a good idea. Another bad corner is Huron and Cathcart. And somebody said, I'm tired of about hearing all the news about the intersection, numerous accidents at Gore and Albert. Just turn that intersection to 4-way stop. Well, it wouldn't be a 4-way, but Mr. Mayor, that's some of the comments. We made it. I do a top 30 countdown once in a while on radio, but this one made it to the #1 spot. The Albert Street and Gore Street. 23 accidents involving 44 people. These are the accidents that are actually reported. A lot of people don't report the accidents when they have one. Plus 43 injuries. So, and then the Albert and Andrew Street is #2. We're even higher than the one on Great Northern Road. Second line, Great Northern Road, Northern Avenue, which are the busiest corners in the entire city. So I hope, fellow councilors, I hope you reconsider that we need to do something. And I was just, I do my daily readings, and one of the readings the other day on, of all people, Martin Luther King Jr., he said, because sometimes we say, is this the right time to do this? Or should we wait? Should we have another study? Martin Luther King Jr. said, the time is always right to do what is right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, we have to go to the seconder, Councillor Shoemaker, and then we'll get to you. He's almost run out the clock on you here, eh?
Very close.
Councillor Grandinetti?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, a few months ago, I had some suggestions on what could possibly be done at this intersection, and one of them was to possibly barricade the parking spots south of Albert on the west side of the road. And that's something I would like to happen ASAP. I drive a truck and I sit up high, and to me it's a visibility issue as well at that corner. If we could do that right away to see if that will help the issue, I don't know. If anyone's on Facebook, you'll see they're posting the pictures pretty much weekly, daily, whenever there's an accident happening. Someone's got a camera set up there, and I'm too scared to look for the camera because I'm worried I'm going to T-bone someone or get T-boned. I still don't know which business it is, but if you look at most of these videos from this business, most of the time the person's going right through, and like they say, it's we are the ones that are causing the accidents. But I would have to agree with Councillor Turco. This intersection is a safety hazard. So if there's anything that could be done to address the issue, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Girardi. Mr. Girardi, is there typical behavior that happens at intersections where lights are removed in terms of how accidents ebb and flow after lights are removed for a period of time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, when you're looking at, I think what you're trying to ask here is how long would you study and take the data, stats and data from an area before you make any changes? The industry standard is 3 years. So in this case here, I think since the last change we've made, it's been 4 months.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Girardi. I have looked at the data on another intersection, Conme and Carmen's Way, which was, I'm sure a number of councillors will remember when that stop sign was reversed. It used to be the other way. There were an increase in accidents after that time. 2006, the stop sign was the way it used to be. It changed, increase in accidents for a period of 3 years, and back down to as low, if not lower, than pre-change levels. That is what traffic experts like Ms. Hamilton Beach, Mr. Starzomski, Mr. Rumio will tell you is going to happen at Albert and Gore and Albert and Andrew. Accidents go up, people get used to the change, and accidents go back down, oftentimes to below pre-change levels. I've seen the videos that were posted on Sioux Online this weekend. Any number of them appear to be people blowing the stop sign. So I'm not sure that adding a different type of traffic signal will make people obey it any more than they're currently disobeying the stop sign that's there. So I would say we need to get the data for a number of more months. It's been, a year and 3 months since the last change, you said, so that's 15 months. We'd be looking to get another 15 months of data, basically, before we could have a real sense of whether or not there is an ongoing problem at this intersection.
Okay, so we're going to take Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Myers.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Girardi. Sorry, you touched on, I think you said it was 4 months ago when the last change, and 4 months ago, was that the starburst? Was that the extra large stop sign? What was it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, you're correct. I came back, I believe, on September 11th and reported to the council verbally that we made the changes that council had requested earlier in August. Those changes were done and complete by September 11th. So we added the bursts, we put the road indications, very large road indications, the painted wording. Unfortunately, a month and a half later, we're into our winter program, so you don't get to see those. And then we also have the larger signs.
Okay, so that brings me up to the other question. I'm not sure if you can really answer this, but where is it? So could we say that the increase in accidents is because of the removal of the traffic lights, or could it be another cause, weather-related, distraction.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, I certainly don't have the information on what caused the accidents, but listening to Councillor Shoemaker, he had mentioned he had watched the videos, and people are going through the stop signs, from what we understand.
And is it possible, if we do look at this again in March, that we can have some police data that could maybe help us understand what would be the cause?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, again, we always request this. We usually don't get police data right away. It takes a while. They hold on to their, obviously, their information and then provide it to us periodically. And then, of course, we meet with them and discuss some of these issues.
Okay. I have just two more quick questions. I'm always concerned about this area of the city because we get a lot of wonderful visitors coming to our city coming off the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if it's more confusing, not just those that live here, but maybe possibly those that are visiting our city, our friends from Michigan or friends from other areas.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, what we found is people who come from out of town, just like yourself, when you're visiting small communities or other communities, you're more cautious of the traffic patterns or the traffic indicators and traffic control. So you'll probably take note of that stop sign where right now what you're trying to do is adjust people from their old traffic patterns of driving and switch them to change.
Okay.
And that's exactly what's going on here.
Very helpful information. And one final question. In general, are we seeing accidents in our city increasing?
Certainly.
In our city, within our city, are we seeing accidents in general increasing?
Increasing?
Mm-hmm.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, I wouldn't have the data on across the city right now with me here. So I wouldn't be able to tell you whether we're increasing or not.
So
the
again,
specific intersection, yes, there has been an increase.
Okay. So again, that would be information from the police, possibly.
Certainly, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question through you to Mr. Girardi is around the aspect, and Councillor Grandinetti had raised it earlier, and I travel that route a little bit myself, and I've also found the sight line when I'm looking south on Gore, when I'm trying to go east on Albert, and I have found that depending what type of vehicle is parked on the west side of Gore, it can quite absolutely emphatically obstruct the sight line. Is there any, you're going to bring back a report, I think, right? Isn't that what Councillor Turco's resolution asked for?
And Councillor Turco's resolution does ask for a report returned in March.
Yes, that's what I thought. So when you bring back your report, could we possibly ask you, or do we need another resolution to ask that, could we restrict the first 3 spots or whatever would be logical? If you go and sit there yourself in the vehicle and look down, you'll quickly see, I'm hearing my friend here go yes, you'll quickly see the sight line that is obstructed. Maybe it's 3 spots. I think it might be 3 spots. Could we bag those and restrict those parking for a period of time? And again, just see if it has any impact. Is that doable, or do you need a separate resolution to ask for that?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers.
Am I confusing you?
We actually have the commissioner or the deputy CAO from CS&E, and quite frankly, that's where those are housed, and they're under transit. So that decision can be made by council to not have those 3 parking spots if you so choose.
Well, I guess I think it's an issue, and I think that would help tremendously at the sight line. And it's only northbound traffic on Gore. We're talking about a one-way street here. So you're only going to get hit with a vehicle coming from the south if you're going east. So I do think the sight line's an integral factor in this. So I'm just asking whether we need a separate resolution for that, or can that be... Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Fada?
Mention this thing about sight lines is a big issue. We were having, Councillor Brew and I were having that problem on the corner of Douglas and Core Road. People had a habit of illegally parking in front of the former Bank of Montreal. By doing so,
Councillor Fata, you're talking
No,
about a
but
different
I just want to stress the fact that, okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I want to stress the fact that visibility is an issue here, in my opinion, and most of our opinions. So that is an issue that has to be addressed. The other thing I want to mention briefly, Mr. Mayor, is speed will probably be a factor to people going up Gore Street. If speed is involved in that scenario, the guy that's coming through from Albert, there will be an accident more likely because of speed. And I think part of the reason why there's speed, Mr. Mayor, is the fact that the two lights going back towards Bay are not synchronized properly. One turns green, the other one turns red. That makes for an impatient driver. So as he's coming through on Gore and Queen, after having waited for the two previous lights, he's speeding towards Wellington Street to catch that green light. So he's thinking about getting to that green light, not worrying about the intersection of Albert and Gore. As a result, it's more of an accident waiting to happen. So the synchronization of those two previous lights might be a factor that plays into this.
Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the point about the two parking spots to the south of that intersection, I tend to agree with the councillors who are saying there might be a visibility problem there. Having said that, I'm going to move a resolution that we bag those tomorrow until this report comes back. Why would we wait if all of us are sitting around here saying there's a problem?
Mr. Ver, I think it's very clear from the comments in council that there's an interest to block those parking spaces off in the near term. Do you need a resolution to direct the transit staff to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe we do, given the will of council expressed here tonight.
I think it's pretty clear to me that you all want to see that happen. Councillor Grandinetti suggested it last meeting. Yep. Councillor Turco suggested it. Councillor Fata suggested it. So that's a pretty clear unanimous direction to staff. Councillor Butland and Councillor Myers, it's a unanimous direction to staff. So Mr. Ver will see to it that those spots, parking spots, are bagged as soon as transit staff can do that. He will see to, he will instruct transit staff tomorrow when they get it done. Councillor Nero will be a matter of.
It's okay, 2 to 3, whatever's there. I can't remember if there's 2 or 3.
Okay. So with that noted, can we vote on this resolution? Okay, so recorded vote. Mr. Turco has asked for a recorded vote. Councillor Turco, I apologize.
Councillor Turco?
4.
Councillor Fata?
4.
Councillor Christian?
4.
Councillor Kompovich is absent. Councillor Hupenin?
4.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
4.
Councillor Grandinetti?
4.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Against.
Councillor Nero?
4.
Councillor Bruni?
4.
Councillor Myers?
4.
Councillor Butland?
4.
Mayor Provenzano?
4.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we have the bylaws to vote on.
So I have a motion by Councillors Christian and Grandinetti, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date January 22, 2018 be approved, save and accept bylaws 2018-19, 2018-18, 2018-17, and 2017-193. That's the two that were Pierce Street, the animal control that's being postponed, and the one that Mayor Provenzano has a conflict on.
Carried. Sorry, all in favor. Carried. Councillor Christian, if you could just come and take care of the one I have a conflict on.
I have a motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti, resolved that bylaw 2017-193, being a bylaw to stop, close, and authorize the conveyance of a portion of Cameron Lane in the Cameron subdivision, be read a third time in open council and finally passed this 22nd day of January 2018.
All in favor? Against? Carried.
And I have a motion for closed. Resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss a property disposition and labor relations and employee negotiations. Further be it resolved that should said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
Sorry, I got so carried away on you. A motion by Councillors Butland and Grandinetti that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.